And we ended up in Paris, you know.
All right, well, close enough, I guess.
There's a lot of people are into
Well, there's orientations for this.
Yes, yes.
We just got tired. Give us to write to our students.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like an 18-year-old. You have a 40, 45.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, take it as a compliment. I'm sure there's grandparents that come to these things,
Yeah.
though, but
That's what she
But
said.
take it as a compliment, yeah. No, they keep eyeballing me and they're like, are you a student or are you a parent or are you just here? And I'm like, I'm faculty, leave me alone. So,
So cute.
oh, well, you know, she's trying to do the right thing. Yeah, so,
Do it anyways.
Yeah.
yeah, just
Say.
give me a random name. I'll write him a letter, you know? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We should just do that. That'd be great. Anyway, so happy Thursday. It's Thursday, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know. You stuck with me today, at least for the first half. Jay had a 9 o'clock meeting. He couldn't reschedule, so he'll be popping in later, but you know. It's yeah.
We miss him, but.
I always feel inadequate with the military history part of it. You know, it's just like I can teach it, but he's told me he feels the same about the social stuff when he has to teach it. So I'm like, okay, well then at least, yeah, we have the same imposter syndrome that we can match up for each other. So anyway, we left off with the Second Peloponnesian War about to start. And of course, we had the First Peloponnesian War that was ended with that lovely 30-year truce that you'll see did not last 30 years. So my clicker needs to work. There you go. All right, so what happens here is we have a bit of a proxy war. We have a civil war that turns into a proxy war. Okay. There is a city called Epidamnus, okay, which you can see up there in the corner. And they have a civil war. Okay. Corinth and Corcyra get involved. Okay. Corinth is an ally of Sparta, and Corcyra is neutral. All right, but is loosely allied with Athens because Corcyra has a decent sized navy. Okay, so this is essentially Sparta and Athens fighting each other in Epidamnus. Epidamnus gets very quickly forgotten about. Okay, excuse me. Sorry. So by siding with Corcyra, Athens actively sides against Corinth, which means that she sided against Sparta as well. The treaty from a decade prior, the 30 Years peace, had stipulations in it that would allow for arbitration in these kind of disputes, but Sparta refused. Yeah. So they basically said, you've gone to war against us. We don't care about trying to avoid it. Yeah, because they want a war. That's how these things always work. So Corinth/Sparta wins, and Sparta takes that as a go to start more war. Okay. There we go. Okay. So the Spartans march into Attica. Okay, so the Athenian territory in 431. This takes a few years to get things really going. The Athenians know that they are not going to win against the Spartans in a pitched battle. This is just not going to happen. Okay, so they pull everybody in for a siege. Now, last week, Jay talked about the long walls. Okay, there's a drawing of what it would look like from the port. So they have these massive walls that go from Athens to the port. Okay, so as long as they can keep bringing in supplies, use their navy to bring in supplies, then they should be able to withstand the siege, okay? And they pull everybody in, you know, remember a polis is not just the people who are living in the city, but it's the people in the surrounding land. It's the people who are out in the countryside who feed the city and all of that. So if you want to protect all of your citizens in this way, you're bringing a lot of people into a very small area, okay? So, what do you think happens then? Yeah, if the siege is broken, then they're, you know, extra SOL. But yeah, what else? Get a lot of people in a small area without modern sewage. Yeah, disease breaks out. War's favorite thing, disease. Yeah. We see a massive outbreak of plague. Now, in some places, you will see this discussed as capital P plague, as in the bubonic plague. Probably not that. But there are some people who have made that argument. The thing is you don't need it to be bubonic plague. Bubonic plague is spread by flea bites. All right. When you have a lot of people in a small area like that, all you need is one untreated water source or one tainted water source, I should say. So yeah, a lot of people end up dying in Athens while they are trying to protect the people. Okay. And this goes on for a couple of years. Okay. This is also, we get in the sources, I think it's Xenophon, but don't quote me on that, where he talks about them conducting what we would think of as biological warfare. At one point, they were tossing the bodies of the dead people out of the walls. I think two reasons, right? One is to hopefully get the Spartans sick with whatever is killing all of them, but also it's a way to get rid of the bodies, you know. But I think it was more the former. So they're sitting there, they have this siege. They're well placed for it as long as they can kind of, you know, control the disease outbreaks. Then they take and use their navy to start harassing the Peloponnesian coast. Okay. So they are going to try to pull the Spartans back into their own territory. So by harassing the Spartans around their own territory, then they'll go back home, they'll leave Athens. Okay. Some of the Spartans go back. You know, the Spartans are not well known for their naval tactics, as it were. And what we end up with is years of fighting that has no actual resolving. Okay. The book to read on this is Lords of the Sea by John Hale. Okay. And the picture up there is from a reenactment group. The way that people do like Civil War and World War II reenacting in the States, people in Europe do ancient Greece, ancient Rome, all of that. You get a little bit of that in the States too. There's a Roman Legion in Detroit of reenactors. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So we have a decade of fighting. Nothing is decisive. Okay. And we get to a point where it's not just disease outbreak that's killing people, but we're starting to have famines. This is starting to affect outside of the direct area. So again, let's go have a negotiated peace. And so we have a guy named Nicias, and he negotiates what's called the Peace of Nicias because, you know, he's important. This was, hey!
Oh, it's hard to hear. I hope the war is still going.
Just in time to talk about all the stuff I just passed over in the Second Peloponnesian War. I told them you had that appointment at 9, so I wasn't sure when you were going to get here or your meeting. Yeah, so this Nicias negotiates a peace. It's supposed to last 50 years. All right. You can imagine how that happens. You know, it's not going to last 50 years. Nobody's happy with it. Okay, nobody's happy with it, but it can be argued with these types of situations, that if nobody's happy with it, you've succeeded. Okay, I take that as a genuine truth in history, that when you end a war like this, where there has been nothing decisive, and they're just ending it because there's famine and everybody's dying and we just have to stop fighting. Yeah, just end it and nobody's gonna be happy. And yeah. I had talked about, oops, I'm going backwards. Is there anything to add particularly interesting about battles? Just to put you on
I
the
will
spot
say not
right
with-
away.
Not
in a
with
second.
this one.
Okay.
Not in the second one. That's-
So now we get to one of my favorite people in this era. Okay, because this story is utterly, it's a thing. Okay. So fade out, fade in. Okay. 415, we have a man named Alcibiades, okay, who is a member of the Athenian Assembly. And he is, according to the sources, one of the most beautiful men that ever lived. Okay. The statue probably doesn't do him justice. Let's say that. Okay. He is supposedly at one point, he's slept with like at least 10 members of the Athenian Assembly. There's like all of this wonderful gossip about him that you kind of have to just go, okay. But the idea that the sources say he's just so beautiful, it's, they're distracted by him. I actually do have a point by saying this. Would you say? I'm sorry. Probably. So there is this city of Egesta on the island of Sicily, and they are fighting against Syracuse, which is another Sicilian colony. Okay, or excuse me, it's a Corinthian colony on Syracuse. And Alcibiades says, we should fight for this. Okay, we should get involved in this because this is going to make up for how badly we did in previous fighting. Okay, that war that we had that was supposed to have a 50 years peace. Okay, and let's make up for that. So he puts together a fleet of 200 ships manned by 4,500 Athenians and 45,000 allies, which sails out to sea and runs into a storm. Lost completely. Okay, wiped out. A lot of people. Okay. Now, Alcibiades was supposed to be with that fleet, but he wasn't. Because the night before the fleet was supposed to set out, excuse me, the morning before the fleet was supposed to set out, the people of Athens wake up and they go outside to get their newspapers or whatever. And they find that all of the statues of Hermes have been what is called desecrated. This is called the desecration of the Hermes. And Hermes is, I want you to imagine like one of the little cherub kind of statues, okay? But usually with an erect penis. And this was something that you just put out, and it was one of the statues that you had out in your yard with the, your other
Decorations.
yeah, decorations. I don't know how to put it. Somebody had gone around Athens the night before and knocked all the penises off the statues.
Not only done that, but stolen them.
Yeah, and stolen them. It wasn't like they just went and left it there. They were all gone. Okay. So there is this like metaphorical unmanning of Athens, right? The instructor that I first heard this, the professor that I first heard this story from, would joke about how he is absolutely sure this was a teenage prank. And that someday when they are digging somewhere around Athens, they are going to find the equivalent of a shoebox under somebody's bed with all of these in them. Okay. And I kind of think he's right. But the problem is they blamed Alcibiades for it. Okay. The Athenian Assembly, and this is before the ships went out. Okay. The Athenian Assembly blames him for this. Says either he did it personally or he planned it or, whatever. And so as he's heading out to deal with the fleet, to go on the fleet, they call him back. And they say, you have to explain this to us. You have to stand in front of the assembly and explain why this happened. Now here's the problem. He just kind of leaves. So it does lend toward the idea that he may have had something to do with it, but I don't think he did. I think he was just, he saw that there was some writing on the wall there. So he gets accused of this. He gets called back. Instead of going back, he goes to Sparta. Okay,
This is not the end of his story.
no,
so
not
to
even
speak.
close, not even close. But you know, the desecration of the Herms is one of my favorite stories because it's just so ridiculous. Um, get my notes.
Never,
here.
never
There we
mess
go.
with the city-state statues.
Oh,
Comes back to haunt you.
no. And it's such a like strictly. I mean, it is very pointed. It's not like they knocked the heads off the statue. I mean, double entendres aside, okay. It's not like they killed Hermes, they just, unmanned him. Excuse me. So he goes over to Sparta, and Athens loses this massive fleet, and Athenian prestige is starting to suffer because the massive fleet and the unmanning of the Hermes. So rebellions start popping up because, of course, that thing that had started out as the Delian League, that we're going to go back and make the Persians pay for what they did to us and all of that. And Athens is going to hold on to the money, even though it's on Delos. This has become the Athenian Empire. Right? And they are now holding control over people that do not want to be part of the empire anymore. So rebellions start popping up. And then here's the kicker. Persia shows up. Persia shows up on Sparta's side. Okay. Anybody want to guess why? Alcibiades. The Spartans took in Alcibiades, got information from him, said, thanks for all that. Do you want to become a Spartan? He says, no, but I'd kind of like to stay here for a while. And then he starts talking to all of the people about democracy. And the Spartans aren't having any of that. So they kick him out. He says, all right, fine. I'll go to Persia. So he goes to Persia. He tells Persia what's going on. Right? Gives them all sorts of inside information that he should not be doing. Yeah, my notes. I do have this in my head, but yeah. Right. So Alcibiades then, okay, has given Persia this information. Persia goes on Sparta's side, but they don't like the idea of just giving aid to one side because then Sparta's going to be too powerful and they don't want to deal with a powerful Sparta, all of that. So Persia sends Alcibiades as their envoy to Athens with an offer for help, which is accepted. So now Persia is arming both sides. It's beautiful. Okay.
Let the Greeks destroy themselves.
Exactly. We'll let them destroy themselves and we'll come in and pick up the pieces. Very smart. Very smart. Let me see, what was the thing? Because there's one last bit with Alcibiades and I don't have it here. Yeah, they force the Athenians to take Alcibiades back in and then he kind of disappears from the record. Am I missing a step there? I don't think I am. It's been a while since I taught this, so yeah, but it's Alcibiades is an interesting one. Yeah.
So you don't know what happened.
He probably just kind of retired, just
He retired or was retired. The people who were there.
yeah, he might have been. We don't know.
Yeah. And the Athenians did do another expedition. They put together another force to go to Sicily, and that one is destroyed too. It gets there, and then they're defeated.
I'm gonna double check on Alcibiades because I don't remember. Here, if you want to talk about this. Because I'm sitting here going, we have a whole, I think Plutarch has a biography of Alcibiades, so we should know what happened to him. I just can't remember. It's been one of those days.
So the funny thing is that the Persians know the strengths and weaknesses of the Athenians and the Spartans. So what the Persians do for the Spartans is they give them a navy. So they build warships so that the Spartans can fight the same as the Athenians, and they man them. So they actually have, their own people on board those. And then for the Athenians, they give them money so that they can hire mercenaries, pulling them from, the western part of Turkey. So it weakens that area so the Persians could come in afterwards. And we get to 405. And the Athenians are really on their last legs by this point in time. They have the actual big confrontation that takes place where Athens is defeated is not in the Greek mainland. Instead, it's kind of in the northwestern part of Greece, kind of as you're going towards Persia itself. You have this Athenian navy and army that are blockaded at this one city, and the Spartans and Persians come in and they attack and overwhelm this last Athenian force. And that's really the swan song for that, because that was the last real push that the Athenians can do. So they've lost 3 armies, 3 navies within the span of 10 years. And a lot of the Athenian allies who were there through most of that, they've slowly been negotiating with Sparta to either come completely into the war on their side or to go neutral, because they're looking at Athens as pretty much a spent force.
Alcibiades went back to being a general for Athens for a year or so, was involved in some of this, and then retired to a villa with his mistress in Phrygia, which some Persians who did not care for him, probably with some Athenians and Spartans too, if I'd guess, find his villa and set it on fire, and then as he's escaping with his mistress, they kill him. So that was what happened to Alcibiades.
Yeah.
I don't know how I forgot that.
That's okay. That's okay. There's a lot going on. So
I'll blame coffee.
yeah. So you have this major defeat in 405. And then the Spartans end up coming to the walls of Athens to besiege it. And finally, the Athenians, again, at this point, they're pretty much done. They ask for a peace treaty. They want a ceasefire. They want this to finally end. Now, what will end up happening is that you do have, a Spartan occupation briefly of Athens. They get rid of Athenian democracy, and what they end up doing is there's a small garrison of Spartan soldiers who stay behind in the city, but they find people in Athens who will basically enforce the peace and kind of keep they're not necessarily for Athenian democracy. These are oligarchs who are going to be supporting Sparta as they go through.
So then the Persians are having
Their own internal problems.
their own difficulties. Okay. And Spartans decide to get involved in that. Okay. And they back one of the brothers. Sorry, they back the wrong brother, as I recall. Yes. I'm having a moment. Sorry.
That's okay. So you have Athens surrender. So in theory, this Peloponnesian War is done. You have a civil war breakout in Persia. Now, again, Persia was helping both sides for a while. You have the king die. You have his sons then go to war against each other to decide who is going to be the Persian king. And for the Spartans, they're looking at it as we would rather have a weaker Persia. So we'll go for the one who's contesting the throne.
Yeah, they back Cyrus, and then Cyrus gets killed.
And so what
The
ends
end
up
of-
happening is you have this massive Spartan and their allied army stuck in the Persian heartland. And then they have to fight their way to the coast in order to evacuate back to Greece. This is where you get the Greek general who's in charge, the Spartan general who's in charge of this is Xenophon. He writes the Anabasis, which is basically his discussion of this Persian civil war and then what the Spartans have to do in order to fight their way out of Persia. Because they are in the interior of that empire, deep in the interior, when they find out the one they're backing is killed.
Yep. So the Greek cities in Asia Minor, of course, remember, these are the ones that Sparta wanted to go back to Greece way back in the day. They're fearing the Persians, so they ask the Spartans for help. The Spartans help, and they do so well against the Persians that Artaxerxes, the Persian king, offers an alliance to any of the Greek city-states that are willing to back them against the Spartans. Okay. So we're continuing this civil war in Greece.
Yeah.
Not Germany.
Yeah,
That's
so
Germany. Okay.
that's all right. So now we're on the fourth Peloponnesian War
Mhm.
as we go through. And in this
We
case,
stopped numbering at this point.
yeah. In this case, what ends up happening is that Sparta is really the one who's on the outskirts. Persia has managed to basically buy Argos, Athens, Corinth, and Thebes. So the four biggest cities in mainland Greece to crush Sparta. And by this point too, Sparta is worn out as well. And what ends up happening is that the Thebans are the ones who are actually the leader of this coalition against Sparta. And they know how to beat the Spartans. They figured it out. What they have, they're still going to use that hoplite tactic, but what they end up doing is for one portion of their battle line, instead of having the usual, 10 people standing in a line, they go up to 50 deep on one side of the battlefield, so that one flank of this Theban army will be able to basically break Spartans without problem, because it's basically like a sledgehammer hitting a wall. And they're able to crush Sparta. And what they end up doing is that they go through the process of freeing the vast majority of those villages and cities that the Spartans had enslaved in their home territory. And then they end up fortifying those cities so that the Spartans cannot take them back. Basically, what ends up happening is Thebes destroys the ability for Sparta to function as a society. The city is still going to exist for centuries after this, but it is a shadow of itself. It hits a point where they dominated their entire region. After Thebes is done with them, it's basically just the immediate countryside around the city. All of the other cities that the Spartans had, taken over have now become Thebes' allies.
Yeah. Which we went through.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, the way that this is playing out is that we've hit a point by the time we get to the 370s and 360s that all of mainland Greece is pretty much burned out. With all the wars that have taken place, with all of the fields that have been destroyed, all the men and materials that have been, wasted in this fighting, those classical, powerful city-states like Athens and Corinth, even Thebes and Sparta, are just shadows of themselves. And what has happened is that you have one of the northern neighbors, okay, one of those proto-Greek states, Macedonia, which has been watching this take place. They have organized, and they're going to use the Peloponnesian Wars, the fallout from it, in order for them to then become leaders of the Greek world.
Which is where our boy Philip II comes in.
Alexander the Great's father. And he's an interesting one. Which
we'll get into in the next lecture.
Yes.
All right. Alexander. Starting with Philip. Okay. So as we talked about already, Macedonia is this area to the north of Greece. You'll sometimes hear it called Macedonia because there wasn't a soft C in the Greek, but they consider themselves to be Greek. They speak a version of Greek. Okay. As far as all of us are probably concerned, they speak Greek. It's only if you ask the Athenians, they'll say it's a version of. They are a loosely organized kingdom. Okay. They do not do the city-state thing. They have a king. Okay. But anytime the Greeks needed help, so to speak, they did not get involved. Okay. They remove themselves from involvement in any of these wars unless it's absolutely necessary. Okay. Double checking the screen there.
Yes,
And as I said last week, there was the one Macedonian general who just offered up his daughter if the Persians would leave them alone. So,
and it's one of those things with the Macedonians too, that the reason a lot of times they don't get involved with the Greeks is that all of the different territories that border them. Okay, so dark red, that's the core of Macedonia, the kingdom of it. And then eventually they're going to expand further north both northeast and northwest, they are running into people who are the Illyrians, who are considered barbarians by both the Macedonians and the Greeks. Epirus, which is another one of these kind of weird Greek adjacent semi-proto-Greek peoples.
Yes.
You have Thrace, which is to the northeast. And then you have this area that's called Thessaly. And what ends up happening is that the Greek city-states and the Macedonians kind of trade back and forth over who controls this region. And with the Macedonians, again, it's a loose monarchy. There's an aristocracy there. A lot of the people who would be considered the nobles are the warriors. They're basically the king's ability to raise soldiers. So he's very reliant on their loyalty. So a lot of times, if a Macedonian king cannot rely on his officers to go to war, he won't, because he's looking at it as a way to protect himself.
So Philip is the second son. Okay, his brother is king, his brother dies, and his nephew becomes king. His nephew is a year old. Okay. Now, Philip had been educated in Thebes. He was a great lover of all things Greek. Okay, he was well educated in Greek fighting techniques. He was well educated in Greek philosophy. He was Plato's philosopher king, or at least he tried to be. All right.
He wanted to be the leader of the Greek world.
Yeah.
And he did everything he could to do that. He's actually a hostage in Thebes.
Mhm.
He's again with the Macedonians because yes, it's a kingdom and it looks like it's this huge territory. It's very disparate. There's not a lot, there's not a big Macedonian army at the time to defend itself. And so in order to ensure peace in the north, what ends up happening is the city of Thebes, the ones that betray all the other Greeks, they take Philip as a hostage. And it's not that he's under house arrest. He's able to go anywhere he wants to inside Thebes. He's able to talk to anybody who wants to, in terms of the political and military leadership of Thebes. He's able to have access to them. He's able to see how the Theban phalanx fights. And this is going to be one of the things that allows the Macedonians to crush Greece later on. He knows their tactics. He knows their weapons. He talks to city leaders. He talks to philosophers. One of the things that Philip wanted was for his son and for the Macedonian noble sons to be educated by Greek philosophers. Again, it's that idea that he's trying to come in to the Greek world and prove that the Macedonians are that. And it's going to take a lot for that to go through. Philip's father, Philip's brother are going to be killed fighting against the Illyrians, fighting against those barbarians to the northwest. His father is killed 1 year, and then within 6 months, his brother's killed as well. And so Thebes releases him. Basically, the idea is they don't really like the idea of the Macedonian monarchy and kingdom being to the north of them. But if that collapses and you have those barbarians coming in and overrunning that kingdom, that's tens of thousands of enemies that are sitting at a northern border that's not necessarily fortified. So what the Thebans will do is they release him to be regent, basically to watch over the Macedonian throne until his nephew's old enough to come of age.
Yeah, and there's also the idea here that he was an early or preteen when he was sent, when he was made a hostage. So he's been educated in this, he's been inculcated in these Greek ways. The Romans used to do this too, and a lot of other societies did as well. You conquer an area and you take a couple of the sons of the king, maybe a couple of the daughters too for different reasons, but you take a couple of the sons of the king and you hold them hostage and you teach them how to be subjects of Rome, okay, or whichever country.
You're indoctrinating them.
Yeah.
Is what you're hoping. That they will, when they go back home to be the ruler of that area, they're more loyal to you than their own people.
And it works for the Romans very well. Yeah. And it might have worked for Philip had Greece and Thebes and everything been stronger, but he was stronger. Macedonia was stronger. If it had been 150 years previously, it might have been a different thing. Excuse me. So he's sent back to act as regent for his infant nephew. And then his infant nephew, well, he goes in front of the various nobility of Macedonia, and he basically convinces them that it would be better to have the adult brother of the previous king than the infant son of the previous king. And his nephew then disappears from the record.
Yeah, regicide is not uncommon in Macedonia. Kill the nobility, the kings have to be very careful, even among their own family, because they know that there are plots. That a lot of Macedonian kings have been murdered by brothers or sons or uncles. And so this is not anything that is, uncommon. And Philip, when he comes to the throne, he's able to rally what's left of the Macedonian army and he crushes the Illyrians. And once he does that, what he will do is he goes through the process of basically reorganizing the Macedonian army.
He doesn't run into a bunch of, there's, I think, 2 small rebellions in favor of the baby, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which was more against him than in favor of the baby.
Yeah.
So he's able to reorient outward very
Yes.
quickly.
And many of the generals that he inherited from his father and his brother, but they viewed Philip as being the more rational choice that goes in there. What Philip is going to do is he goes through the process of figuring out a way to train and equip and lead his infantry and cavalry to beat any other army in the world at the time. And he's still going to go through the process of having those phalanxes, so having those soldiers in the ranks supporting each other. But in this case, instead of having the 6-foot, Greek spear, he has what's called the sarissa. This goes anywhere between 15 and 21 feet long. You need both hands to use this. And basically think of it as, this formation becomes like a porcupine or a hedgehog. Greek hoplite formations cannot get anywhere near the Macedonian one because the sarissas project that far out. You can have up to the first 5 or 6 ranks having their spears projecting outwards. So it's literally you're walking into a wall of steel before you get there. Plus, as in the illustration, he's not having a group of, 10 soldiers. It's 25 to 40 deep, depending on what he wants as he goes through. The sarissas also act as shields because the ranks that are in the back, they have them angled or they have them straight up. So if you have groups of archers or slingers firing at you, those sarissa are going to knock some of those projectiles out of the air. The other thing is that with the Macedonian hoplites, a lot of the heavy armor and the shield, like the classical Greek hoplites, a lot of that is abandoned. They're going to have iron helmets. They have a smaller shield that has a strap that basically goes around their shoulder so that it hangs onto the left side, but it leaves the arms free so that they can handle the sarissa. And you can see it in the picture of the reenactors there. They're a little outgunned if you're the Greek hoplite on the right-hand side. You really have to fight and be lucky to be able to get close enough to get to them. Another thing that the Macedonians will have too, not only do they have their sarissa, they're also given the sword as well as short swords. So just in case the sarissa breaks, or if they have to engage into really close combat, they can still stab with it as they go through. Like I said, most of the heavy armor is abandoned. It's this kind of laminate cloth that they put over there.
And leather.
Yeah.
The phalanx is the anvil of this army, basically meaning it will hold anything in place. The actual striking power is the cavalry. Okay, with the Macedonians, their area is not as heavily mountainous. I mean, there's still a lot of mountains and hills there, but there's a lot of really open plains. And so there's a lot more horses that are there and they're incorporated into the army. Now, for Philip, the way that he's built this army, he's commander of the hoplites. Okay, he's commander of the infantry. he creates a corps of cavalry that are called the companions. These are the sons of his nobility and his generals. They've all been raised together. They've all been educated together. They've been educated with Philip's oldest, well, functional son, Alexander III. This is the anvil. This is the hammer that's going to strike them. While this, the Macedonian phalanx moves in and pins the enemy army, the companion cavalry comes around the side and hits them from behind, or finds a spot where it's weakest. And it's the companion cavalry has another contingent that's not talked about a lot. There's light infantry that goes with them. Sometimes they're running on foot. Sometimes they're riding on the horse with the cavalrymen, and they get off just before they hit the enemy line. So they're able to cause as much havoc as they can when they go through. Alexander is a brilliant battlefield commander. He's a genius when it comes to how to incorporate this. Alexander's conquests would not have happened if it had not been for Philip's reforms. Alexander basically takes his father's retooled army to war, and that's what gives him success. There's this light infantry force that goes with the companion cavalry. Depending on what the battlefield looks like, sometimes they're on foot running alongside the cavalry as it's building up speed. Other times they're actually on the back of the horse with the cavalrymen, and then they jump off a little ways before. And these guys are not equipped as hoplites, so they don't have that big sarissa. They have short spears and they have swords and shields. And so what will happen is when the companion cavalry slams into the enemy formation, this light infantry is coming in right behind them. And whatever gap the cavalry makes, these guys come in and they start fighting in close. And Alexander adapts to fighting techniques depending on what his campaigns, what he runs into. A lot of times, if an enemy army surrenders, and there are decent units in it, he absorbs them into his army. He is not, don't get me wrong, it's not that he's not bloodthirsty, because he does kills hundreds of thousands of people over the course of his reign. But if they're people who are useful, he keeps them alive.
Which we'll get into in a bit. Right, so the Greek city-states are at war as usual at this point. And Thessaly asks Macedonia for help against Thebes. Okay. He accepts, runs over Thebes, and then turns around and takes over Thessaly as well.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where you're looking at it's like, ooh, okay, this is not great. But Philip is looking at it as he wants to be the leader of a unified Greek cause. He's not interested in destroying all of these Greek city-states. Initially, he wants to bring them into an alliance. And the idea is that Macedonia is the one that's going to lead this alliance against Persia. Again, Persia is always the boogeyman in this. And Philip is looking at it as if he can have a common enemy with the Greeks, there's the potential that they'll back him up. But a lot of the Greek city-states are not interested in this. Because again, they're looking at it as, well, the Macedonians are barely Greek to start with. Why would we want them as leader of the world?
Yeah.
So what he'll start to do after 356 is I shouldn't say slowly, he's quickly going through the process of defeating all of the neighboring barbarian tribes and smaller kingdoms that are around him to make sure that they will not turn on him if he has to march into Greece or when he goes into Persia. So he's going through the process of crushing his enemies.
All right. Just saying. In the audio wasn't doing anything there. Okay.
In this case, when you have the Macedonian army running in to the Thebans try to use the same tactic they did against Sparta, and it doesn't work because they cannot get anywhere near this Macedonian battle line. And it's a subtle indicator that this is not gonna go well for the Greek city-states. The one that tries to rile up all of the other Greek city-states is, of course, Athens. Athens hate especially one particular Athenian, shall we say, philosopher?
Well, he was a member of the assembly.
Yeah, member of
Yeah.
the assembly. Was a man named Demosthenes. He is saying that if the Macedonians, if Philip is able to, get this coalition with the Greeks, Greek independence is done. They will no longer be able to be independent. And so Demosthenes is trying to rile up not only the Greek city-states, but he's also trying to find people inside the Macedonian army or nobility who might assassinate Philip. And that's the breaking point.
He gives a series of orations that he calls the Philippics. He's got to get out there and give these flowery speeches that are explaining all of what's going on here. That is a term, a Philippic becomes a speech against people, okay? Particularly if it's overly wrought with oratory. And the most famous of the other Philippics are what Cicero said against Antony in the middle of the Roman Civil War, which I won't get into now. But yeah, Demosthenes is an interesting character.
Yeah. And even in Athens, you have this kind of split because there are some who are looking at it as, well, Philip actually has a very powerful kingdom, and it would be better to be on his good side than his bad side. Philip has a reputation of being very meteoric when it comes to his relationships, not only with neighbors, but with his family members.
And these are people who, they don't directly have their own memories of the Peloponnesian Wars, but they have heard about it from their parents and grandparents. And so this is not, they desire stability. As people who have been through war desire stability.
And it's kind of, they're looking at it as, in order to ensure that Athens can have a golden age later on, it needs to be independent.
Return to its golden age.
Yeah.
Because that ship's already sailed.
And so what will end up happening is that he's successful in getting some of the Greek city-states to join this war against Philip. And it is a mistake because it's only Athens and Thebes that are able to raise their armies in time. As soon as Philip finds out that they have allied against him, he wastes no time. He and his son Alexander gather pretty much the entirety of the Macedonian army and march into Greece. And they end up decisively defeating the Athenians and Thebans at this battle called Chaeronea in 338. And they utterly crush this combined Greek army. The Thebans and many of the other Greek city-states had what were called sacred bands. Okay, these were pairs of male lovers who fought in battles with each other. The idea is that you would fight with more passion for a lover than you would your city-state. They are annihilated in this battle.
Yeah, the Theban sacred band in particular was famous throughout Greece. People would, there was a waiting list to get involved to get on it. Okay, couples had a waiting list to get involved in it, and there was only ever 300 of them.
Yeah, and generally they were the elite.
Yeah.
They were the ones who were kind of the spear tip for the fighting. They were in the area that was going to be the most difficult. What ends up happening is this Greek army is pinned by the Macedonian phalanx, and then Alexander comes in and crushes them.
They're all killed.
Yeah. And what ends up happening is this is the subtle indicator that the Greek cities, it's a not so subtle indicator that the Greek city-states cannot defend themselves anymore against Philip. But what he and Alexander end up doing is after the battle is done, they go through and they cremate the Theban and Athenian dead and perform the burial rites, the funerary rites they were supposed to, and then they return the ashes to the cities. Because the idea is, again, they're looking at it as, we didn't want this war. It was forced on us, even though we're the ones pushing these things. And from there, the other Greek city-states basically cave. Because now you've had the two strongest city-states that are left. Well, their armies basically annihilated.
Alexander is all of 16.
Yeah.
At this point, 17. And
But that would be
was his
the,
birthday.
considering
But yeah,
that's manhood at that
Yeah.
point in time.
he's well an adult by that point.
Yeah.
I always love looking back on those things and thinking about what I was doing at 17, and I'm like,
Yeah. And then
Now,
later,
I'm not even
Greeks,
commanding myself.
Macedonians, and Romans are always like, Alexander conquered the world at 30.
yeah,
It's like, thanks for that reminder.
yeah.
It helps when you have your father's army to do that too.
It does, and that's the thing. He inherits a lot. So Philip was a traditional Macedonian monarch in that he had a number of wives. Okay.
Yes.
With his first wife, he has one son. Jay mentioned earlier that Alexander was his oldest functional son. His eldest son is a half brother to Alexander, and his name is Philip Arrhidaeus. I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he was not well.
Yeah, he was mentally disabled.
Yeah.
The best that we could see is either Down syndrome or
some other issue. There's the reason I bring that up in part, Alexander really loved his older brother, at least as far as we can tell. Minimally, he took care of him.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And in part, he did that so that other people couldn't use his older brother against him.
Yeah.
I will give him that much.
Yeah.
But he also did try to bring him in on things. And yeah, the sources don't describe him in such a way that we would think Down syndrome, but there are still some people who say that might have been it. Yeah. So, but the other thing about the Philip, well, he becomes Philip III for a little while, the older brother.
Yeah.
One of the suggestions in the sources as to why he is not capable is that he, at a young age, was poisoned by Philip's third wife, Olympias, who is Alexander's mother. Okay. And this is important to know about Olympias because she becomes implicated in a few other deaths, potentially, one of whom is Philip himself. Okay. Now, after Chaeronea, Philip decides that he's going to take another wife, and this is a woman named Cleopatra. Okay. Not to be confused with the later Cleopatra, but that was a very common Macedonian name for women.
Macedonian women's names are not very creative. There's like 6 of them when it comes to royal women, and that's about it.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, that's why they have numbers.
And with Philip, the reason why he marries so many women is it's alliances with neighbors, and also he's the king. He can do whatever he wants.
Good to be the king.
Yeah. Alexander's mother is from the neighboring kingdom of Epirus.
Yeah.
The one right to the west. It's a way to stabilize that western border.
So he marries this Cleopatra, and then she very promptly gets pregnant, like you do, and then he is going to hold a celebration. Okay, so
he's doing a victory lap.
Yes. So this is for Chaeronea, and it's also for his potential new son, and it's a wedding ceremony or wedding celebration, and
unifying the Greek city-states, and it's kind of it's kind of the strategic meeting of not only the Macedonian generals, but all of the Greeks that are going to have to, leaders that are going to have to contribute money or food or soldiers to this on the way to Persia. Yeah,
because he has plans to go. We're going to go and destroy Persia, and we are going to avenge ourselves upon them for what Persia had done to us.
In the Persian Wars. He actually does send part of the Macedonian army into Persian territory before the celebration takes place. So he sent a preemptive force to prepare the way for the invasion. Yeah.
So I want you to imagine like the largest parade that you could have happen in the ancient world. Okay. Like the entirety of the city is out. There's a lot of foreign dignitaries. There's a lot of soldiers around. There's a lot of everybody around. A lot of people are very drunk.
Yes.
Because that's what you do.
Yeah. Drinking with the Macedonians, especially the royal family, the generals, is endemic. I mean, if they're not in combat, they're almost always drunk.
Yeah.
And the problem is that with Philip, Alexander, and a lot of the other ones, they cannot hold their alcohol, and they cannot hold their tempers.
Yeah. there, everybody, like, everybody drank in the ancient world, right? Okay, that's just what you did. But and so as historians, we're hesitant to say like this person was an alcoholic. But I would venture to say a lot of the Macedonian upper class were
Yeah.
alcoholics.
And usually,
Alexander included,
yeah,
okay,
usually,
functional,
yeah,
but
usually what you did was you put water in with the wine.
Yeah.
To make it less strong. The Macedonians didn't do that.
and they were thought to be very gauche because of that, but
Yeah.
yeah, don't water your wine. So we have this massive parade and we're celebrating everything that there is to celebrate about Philip and everything else. And in the middle of it, one of his former guards jumps out from an alleyway and stabs him to death. Okay. Immediately, okay. Hmm? Well, we'll get to that.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, so Pausanias, he sees that the deed is done and he runs, okay, and he's got some people who are who've got horses waiting for him and who are gonna go with him, okay. Alexander is not terribly far behind Philip in the parade. He's far enough away that he's not able to grab Pausanias right away, but he's close enough that he can grab his friends and get on horses and chase him down and kill him, okay. So within a matter of a couple of hours, we have the king is killed. His death has been avenged by his son. Okay, they bring Pausanias's body back and go, and there's no question that it was Pausanias who did the stabbing. Okay, because everybody saw it. There was no question there. The question is why? Okay, and there's a few theories. The first I'm going to list here is, to me, the least likely. Pausanias and Philip may have been lovers, and Pausanias had recently been pushed aside
For a new
whatever
one.
for new lovers
And
because
then-
whatever.
Yeah, and then
Um,
once he's pushed aside, he still is trying to get rid of the new lover, and he's gang raped by other men.
so it's possible that he has just decided to kill the king because the king pushed him off, pushed him away. I think that's not likely. I mean, it's possible, but it's for something.
Contributing factor.
Yeah, let's call it a contributing factor. The next one, which is like in the line of likelihood, okay, is that he's paid by Demosthenes and Athenians to kill Philip. Okay. Again, I think possible, but less likely than the other theories, which is that this is done either at the behest of Olympias and Alexander or Olympias alone. Probably not Alexander alone. Okay, that's the thing here. Olympias was very afraid that she and her son, and Alexander is her only child with Philip, that they would be replaced if Cleopatra produces a son or two or three, and Philip lives long enough that these children can hit adulthood and Alexander's then not needed. So there is a good deal of evidence that Olympias did this. Okay. Now, where you might say it's Olympias and Alexander is because he goes and kills Pausanias and his fellows right away.
There's no chance to question them.
Yeah.
As to,
Nothing.
Who else is involved.
Now, here's the kicker though. It's entirely possible and perfectly within Alexander's psyche, okay, within his personality, to have just gone and killed Pausanias, knowing nothing about what was going on, and just said, that man killed my father, I'm going to go kill him. Also, that puts him in an excellent position as he is stepping to the throne, because he has avenged his father's death. He has shown that he is powerful. Okay, he has this, for lack of a better term, mandate for his position. Okay, and what we know of Olympias, she may have been, let's say, manipulative enough to set that up in such a way that she knew that was probably going to happen without even telling her son. Now, here's the problem with this, okay? Olympias was very powerful. She had a lot of influence over Philip before he married Cleopatra. She had a lot of influence over the court. She had her own retinues. People followed her word, right? Whenever women in these kind of patriarchal societies become powerful, the first thing they're called is manipulative. Okay. And the first thing, and they are accused and given, they are blamed for things that have nothing to do with them. The other thing about Olympias is that most of the sources say she's some kind of witch. Okay. Now she did not help this in this case because she claimed that Philip was not Alexander's father, but that in fact a god was Alexander's father who had come to her in the form of a snake, and we can leave it at that. Which you see if you saw the Alexander movie with Colin Farrell and who played
Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie played his mother, and he's actually older than her, right? That was funny. They use that in that movie. That's a really bad movie. But anyway, so she's called a witch. She's said to be manipulative. There's all these things that are often said against women who have power, and yet even for somebody like myself who tends to give benefit of the doubt here, I think she probably did manipulate this situation to make sure that her son had power. And that was the end of that. And then Cleopatra, I think,
Disappears.
yeah, she disappears. I think she had a girl, and so she isn't necessarily killed because she's not dangerous at that point, but she does kind of disappear. So that's that. And then now Alexander is king of Macedonia. And let's take a break. Let me see. Cliffhanger. All right. It's 11, come back at like 11:10, and we'll go quickly through Alexander with the promise of doing a class on Alexander in the fall. How about that?
Yeah. Alexander, the not so great, terrible ruler.
Okay.
But even.
Delay too much here.
Okey doke. All right. Now that we've, here we go. All right. So now we'll do a full class on Alexander.
Yeah.
And we'll do a full class in successors. But we'll get into Alexander himself. Now that Philip is out of the way,
He's still.
He's-
what, 16
he's-
or
He's
17?
19.
he's 19 at this point. Yeah, 19 at this point.
Well,
He is.
yeah, he's so much more mature,
Yeah, yeah.
than he was.
And part of the thing that helps Alexander too is that, all of the sons of, his father's generals and nobles have grown up with him, literally grown up with him and been educated alongside him. So these guys are his supporters. And in many cases, bodyguards.
Mhm.
A lot of the generals that he's going to have that Alexander's going to have in his early campaign are his fathers. And you see that in the initial, years of Alexander's campaigns against Persia, there is a distinct difference between what Alexander is looking at doing and what Philip's generals were trying to do. So, again, in the years before Philip's assassination, after he's crushed Thebes and Athens, he has gone through the process of building the coalition that he wants. Again, it's not that the Greeks are really wanting to do this, but they have no choice with it. So they're contributing soldiers, they're contributing weapons, they're contributing warships and merchant ships, food, and then the ones that are kind of the most loyal to the Macedonians, they're the ones that are watching the other Greek city-states once this army is going to end up leaving. So you had that portion of the Macedonian army that is sitting at the very outskirts of the Persian Empire, ready to go. And they find out that Philip is dead and that Alexander is king. This is where it could have been dangerous for Alexander, because this is one of his father's most trustworthy and talented generals who's sitting there. And if this guy had decided to not allow Alexander to become king, he could have marched back. But instead, he ends up sticking with the throne. Now, Alexander is, building up the rest of this army in order to meet up with this kind of advanced force. And he finds out that Thebes has rebelled. Because Thebes is the city that's crushed by him and his father, had been the city that had held his father hostage, and still believed that it had a chance of rebelling and getting the other Greek city-states to go. Alexander marches as fast as he can, and he is not in the mood for mercy. What he ends up doing is he besieges the city, enslaves the population, and destroys every building in Thebes, tears down the fortification. The only building that is left standing is the house of the descendants of a philosopher that Alexander and Philip liked. Everything else is destroyed, and the people are sold into slavery. Later on, Alexander is going to feel slightly guilty about this, that maybe it was a bit too extreme in it, but it's the idea that it's terror. This is showing that this is kind of, give him a modern, psychological profile. Alexander is a sociopath. If you cross him, he has no problem killing you. Whether you're someone in his family or someone he's grown up with for years, or people that are supposed to be allied to him, he has no problem with this. Once Thebes is destroyed, the other city-states go, you know what? We like this idea. Let's go to Persia. The only one that doesn't is Sparta. But by this point, it is such a shadow, a weakened state of itself. It doesn't mean anything for them to not contribute.
Yeah.
So the first battle that Alexander is going to have in the Persian territory itself is going to be in Turkey. He ends up crossing with the whole army, meets up with the advanced force. So he crosses the Dardanelles. He goes over that waterway that splits Europe and Asia. And his first target is the satrap of Lydia, the first of these Persian provinces, where you had all of the Greek city-states who rebelled to start the Persian Wars in the first place. Alexander is looking at it as if he can crush this first army that he runs into, then the Greeks that are along that western coastline will rally to the Macedonians.
He'll liberate them.
Yeah, he'll liberate them. He'll greet them as a liberator instead of a conqueror. The first battle that he engages in is almost his last. Because at this place is called the Granicus River. You have the Persians on one side, you have the Macedonians on the other, and there's only a few places that you can easily cross. So you have both armies basically lined up, and the Persians control a lot of the fording sites. Alexander decides to take the companion cavalry and basically charge across the river. He's met by the Persian cavalry. While he's fighting, he ends up getting hit in the helmet by an axe, and then he gets chopped in the leg by the same guy. And as he's kind of leaning over in pain, the guy's about to decapitate him. And one of the companions rides up, a guy named Cletus the Black, who ends up cutting this Persian's arm off, basically at the shoulder, and saving Alexander's life there. This is going to be important later, because you think Cletus the Black and Alexander would be good with this. Alexander recovers, and when the army sees that he's injured, they cross the river regardless, and the Persian army ends up breaking. He's not able to capture the satrap, the governor of this, but he's able to capture most of the Persian army. And what he ends up doing is that he basically takes their weapons. At this point, the Persians are still sitting there thinking, well, we might stand a chance against him, but they're kind of seeing that, Alexander is not like many of the other Greeks that they've run across. He's aggressive. Because what he ends up doing is he goes to the capital of this province and besieges it, and he ends up taking it, but he doesn't kill the commander that's there. Okay, what he ends up doing is that Alexander's kind of unique. Even with enemies that he's fighting against, if he defeats them, but they swear that they'll be loyal to him, a lot of times he leaves them in the position that they were. Because the idea is they already know the language, they already know the customs, they already know the infrastructure of the territory that he's in. If they switch their allegiance to him and they stay loyal, they're fine. This is one thing that starts to make the Macedonians and Greeks that are with them angry, because they're looking at it as, if we're coming here for revenge, why are you keeping the people we're fighting against in charge of the territory behind us? It doesn't make sense.
There is a lot to be said for the idea that he sought to create a multicultural Hellenistic Greek Persian world. Okay,
Yeah.
more Greek than Persian, of course, but
Again, one of his,
this
his
idea.
teacher is Aristotle, and it's the idea that you're looking for the best qualities of people in different cultures, and if you can blend those best qualities together, then the culture that comes after it is going to be superior to it, and in theory, remove conflict later on. So he's kind of looking at it as, it's not that he's just conquering this territory. He's going to integrate both, Near Eastern customs with Macedonians and Greeks and vice versa. He's looking to blend them. Now, what will end up happening is he's able to defeat this first army, and the satrap governor escapes, and he goes deeper into the Persian heartland because that's his job. If he can't defend the territory, he retreats with what's left of his army to meet up with the Persian king and the rest of the Persian army along the way. Alexander has a choice. He can either go deeper into Persian territory, so strike further inland, but that leaves Greece and Macedonia vulnerable, because a lot of those Persian city-states, the Greek city-states that are under Persian control, have very powerful navies and some large armies. So what Alexander will end up doing is he sends envoys to these cities to see if they will come over to his side. Some do, but a lot of the biggest ones refuse, because they look at it as, this is just going to be a flash in the pan like all of these other Greek invasions. He'll be defeated somewhere, and then the Persians will come through, and if we turn on them, then the Persians will punish us for it. So they're looking at it as, nothing else, we stay neutral. We won't attack him, but we're not going to give him any food. We're not going to give him any sort of aid to it. That pisses Alexander off. And what he ends up doing is, the ones that declare neutrality, he puts under siege. And so he goes through this process of capturing fellow Greek city-states. and forcing them to come into his, basically his sphere. If they resisted, he tears the walls of the cities down. And he leaves a Macedonian garrison in them in order to make sure that they don't rise up against him. So what he is doing is he's basically securing his back lines of communication. He's making sure that there's no way the Persians can attack Greece or Macedonia with these resources. He's forcing them to join him.
And then he goes to Sardis and doesn't even have to fight because the governor of the city meets him outside the city and says, here,
Yeah.
we surrender.
Because basically the governor of Sardis is looking at it as, and this is a city that's in the interior, so it's off the coastline. It's one of the major cities in this particular area.
It's right here.
And the governor's like, look, we don't want the city under siege. We don't want the population, enslaved or killed in the process. If we open the city gates, then we allow you to come in. Will you let the city stand? Will you let it basically be undisturbed? Alexander says yes. And he leaves this governor in charge. Okay, and again, it's an instance that if they're willing to come over to him and and this comes to bite Alexander a couple times, quite a few times later on. But for a lot of the Persians, they're looking at it as, it's our survival too. It's going to take a long time for the Persian king to show up. So in order to keep ourselves and our civilian populations alive, submit, if nothing else.
So then once this happens, okay, the king of Persia, Darius III, okay, decides to move his court from Persepolis
Here.
okay, yeah, over to Babylon.
Yeah.
So that he's closer to what's going on and he can have a better he can get at Alexander better and he's going to be in charge of the army. And he puts together an army of 250,000 men. Now, in many cases, we look at numbers and say, it probably wasn't quite that much. In this case, it probably was close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's able to pull soldiers from all of the provinces of the Persian Empire. One thing that the Persians did was they built this thing that was called the Royal Road. It was basically, think of it as an ancient highway system in order to allow for the movement of goods and soldiers and news fast from one side of the empire to the other. And it connects all of the major cities that are the capitals of each of these provinces. And what Darius is doing is he's taking the core, okay, basically the core of the Persian army that would have been at Persepolis. And as he's marching towards the city of Babylon, he's gathering more and more forces. And he goes to Babylon, and it's a strategic move because it's kind of the heart of the Persian Empire. You have easy access to move troops because you also have the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to move through. Bless you. And he does not quite know which direction Alexander is going to go. Okay, when Alexander resumes his campaign, is he going to, as he's leaving Turkey, is he going to go south and follow the Mediterranean coastline? Or is he going to go directly east and try to get into the heart of Persia as fast as he can? So Darius is looking at this as get to the closest area we can, assemble as many troops as we can, and then send out scouts and spies to see what is going to end up happening. Now, the next major battle is at a place called Isis. This is in the south, well, kind of the south central part. Let me go back and show you.
Yeah.
Isis is right here. So it's kind of in the southern extreme of Turkey. Isis is this river. Most of these battles are named after the rivers that are around them. Isis is in a spot that is basically a valley surrounded by mountains. So it's a very kind of narrow area. This is where Alexander and Darius basically run into each other by mistake. They have scouting forces out looking for each other, but they're actually almost marching past each other because, again, you don't have satellite imagery or anything else. You have to rely on cavalry to kind of run into each other and then start skirmishing and then send your people back. Isis is kind of one of these really interesting what if moments because they could have technically passed each other completely. And you'd have these two massive armies going after the heartland of the enemy and nothing to stop them as they go through there. Now, Darius is assembled his 250,000 men and he starts marching. What ends up happening is that, again, they've passed each other. So they're actually kind of reversed from where they should be. It should be Alexander coming from the north and Darius coming from the south. They flip-flopped because they have passed each other. And what ends up happening is you have, okay, the coastline to the Mediterranean, you have the river basically emptying out, okay, into that. Darius has a huge advantage in numbers. Again, something like 250,000 men that he could potentially have fighting on this battlefield. Alexander only has about 45,000 men. But the way the terrain is that it restricts the Persians. They cannot put all of their soldiers into the battle at once. So they only have a limited number they can throw in there. One of the other things that is thrown in there too for the Persians is that they've hired Greek mercenaries to support and bolster the center of the Persian army. And Alexander is mad about that. What will end up happening is that Alexander finds out where Darius is in the Persian battle line. And what will end up happening is that you have Alexander leading the companion cavalry and the light infantry that's mixed in with him. He decides to leave the battlefield and charges straight towards Darius as this Macedonian phalanx starts to move. The general who's in charge of the hoplites is his father's general Parmenion, who is kind of pissed at Alexander because he looks at it as, you're abandoning the army. You're leaving the leadership of the hoplites because the Persians have more cavalry than we do. You're leaving us vulnerable to this, and we have to start advancing to support you. Darius panics, though, because he sees this force of Macedonian cavalry leave, basically like an arrow being shot out of the Macedonian line, going directly at him, and he panics. He abandons the battlefield before the battle even starts. And for a lot of the Persians who are there, his officers looking at us, well, why the hell should we fight for him if he's going to take off? That doesn't mean that the battle stops immediately. The battle goes on for most of the day. What will end up happening is that the Persian army, the general who's there, he offers to surrender as the fighting really is turning against him. Not everybody in the Persian army is going to surrender because not all of them are on the battlefield. A lot of them are around the hills watching this take place. And if they're far enough back, they just leave because they get word that Darius has left. And they're looking at it as, well, if he's not fighting, we're sure the hell not going to fight. So the sad part is that the Persians who are in the front line are abandoned. The Persian general surrenders. Alexander accepts that for the Persians, but not for the Greek mercenaries, because they end up fighting against him. So what ends up happening is he refuses their surrender. They end up going onto this hill and basically form into this shield wall, circular shield wall, to try to defend themselves. And Alexander has the Macedonians and their Greek allies basically pelt these mercenaries until they kill every one of them. And then instead of burying the bodies, he leaves them. He allows the soldiers to, strip them of their weapons and their personal possessions. But instead of going through the funerary rites that he had done with the Athenians and Thebans with his father, he leaves the bodies to rot. And it's a message to anybody who's a Greek. If you do not fight for me, then you'll die by me.
So this image here is, sorry
Sorry.
a second. This is a mosaic that is in the House of the Faun at Pompeii. Okay. This was on the floor of the house as you walk in. It is, let's forget what the size is. Yeah, it's 19 by 10 feet. Okay. And when they did the excavations, you could tell on the image, on the mosaic, because of where, they could tell the difference between where from walking on it and where from, volcano. That this was something the people in the house would introduce their guests to and walk them around the process of the battle. Okay, so you see Alexander on that side there, And then on the other side, the guy up top is supposed to be Darius. Now, of course, this
Sure.
is not how the battle actually went, because it's,
They never get to, Alexander never gets
Yeah.
near him.
not that. So then if you hit the thing, there's a drawing of what it's supposed to, a better drawing of what it was supposed to look like,
Yeah.
but this is, it's huge and it tells you how important Alexander was to the society later on.
Mhm.
It is comprised of 4 million tiles. 4 million tiles, okay?
Yeah. And
So,
what's kind of funny is this horse right here is Alexander's horse who carries him through pretty much all of his conquests, Bucephalus, and then Bucephalus drops dead in Pakistan.
You may recognize the image of Alexander that's up there. A lot of books about Alexander have that picture on their cover. Just,
Yeah, and he wouldn't have gone bareheaded in a combat.
No.
His helmet looked like a lion. Okay, a lion's mouth over his head.
so anyway, so that's a little cool.
And here's the other thing that's kind of crazy. Darius was so confident
Yeah,
that he was going to win that he brings his mother, his wives, his daughters with him to the battlefield. He takes off and leaves them behind. Alexander ends up capturing them, and instead of dividing them up among his generals or taking them as wives himself, he treats them as his family. So they're still prisoners to him, but he treats Darius' mother as his mother, his wife as his wife, his daughters as his daughters. Because again, the idea with Alexander, just like the crushing of the Greek city-states, he wants to be the Persian king. So he's looking at it as incorporating some of the Persian royal family into this, new one as they go through.
and his men are expecting him to marry one of the daughters. Okay.
And minimally,
Because that's what you do, right? And some of them are expecting maybe they'll get one of the other daughters, right? He has to put out a message that basically says anybody that rapes any of the Persian women is gonna be killed.
yeah, the royal women.
Immediately. The royal women,
Yeah.
yeah. Forget everybody else in the city, that's.
Yeah.
But the royal women he puts he puts guards that he trusts for himself around them.
And so again, here is the question that Alexander has to face. Darius has retreated. Most of the Persian army has been scattered or captured.
Go ahead, I'm just gonna poke
Okay.
that.
And so it will take time for Alexander's men to recover. Okay, he did suffer a lot of casualties, killed and wounded, and the army's exhausted. The Macedonians and Greeks are exhausted. And so Alexander does have to stop for a while to allow his men to rest and recover from their injuries.
So, right, here's Isis. Okay, when Darius leaves, he goes all the way back to Persepolis. All the way back to Persepolis, okay, and Alexander takes his family and sets them up in Babylon.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
that's gonna be a while.
Was it later? Yeah,
Yeah.
but, yeah, and then in the meantime, he goes and does
Yeah.
this little thing.
Because
So,
again, the idea for Alexander, is this whole area, along the Eastern Mediterranean, a lot of those cities that are there have very powerful navies. So it's that other instance that if Alexander goes into the heartland of Persia, he's leaving a lot of military resources that can hit Greece and Macedonia behind. The other thing that he finds out is that the Egyptians have revolted against the Persians, and they've done this a number of times because the Egyptians, again, they're looking back at themselves as they had been this great civilization. Their latest, conqueror has been defeated, and so they're looking at this is our chance to break free. Alexander decides to go south to secure the Mediterranean coastline and also get Egypt, because Egypt will give Alexander a lot of gold and a lot of grain.
but in the meantime, okay, Darius sends a messenger to Alexander and he offers him all of the territory west of the Euphrates and whichever of his daughters he wants in exchange for peace. Stop the fighting. You can have everything
have
to
the
this
western
line.
half.
Okay. Alexander refuses. He sends back a messenger that says, I'm not even going to talk to you unless you come to me in person and refer to me as Lord of all Asia,
And yeah,
which is Darius's title.
because what Alexander is doing is he wants to replace Darius as ruler of all of the Persian Empire. And his view of it is if he gets this ceasefire, then he has a rival.
Yeah.
And the land in the east is very heavily populated too. So it's entirely possible that Darius is going to be able to form another army and keep this war going. So when Darius gets the refusal, he's like, all right, well, then I guess we'll get more soldiers from the
Yeah.
east and we continue this thing. Now, on the way down, okay, the coastline of the Eastern Mediterranean, when he's going through Syria and Lebanon and Palestine, a lot of the cities that are there agree to join Alexander. Like, look, okay, the Persians have already been defeated. Your army is here. So we will ally ourselves with you. And Alexander wants that. He doesn't want them as independent territories. He wants them incorporated into this new empire that he's putting together. The one that refuses to do that is this city-state that's called Tyre. It's on an island about a mile off the coast. And Tyre looks at it as like, look, we've broken away from Persia. We're not allied to them, but we don't want to be incorporated by you either. We want to stay completely neutral. Alexander will not allow that because again, it's an instance that if he gives any of these areas leeway, that might cause the areas that he's just conquered to rebel. So what he decides to do is put the city under siege. And what will end up happening is this city that's on the island is what would be considered New Tyre. It's a new version of the city. The original city was actually on the coast. It was on the mainland, and the ruins of the city are there. Alexander builds a mile-long bridge using the ruins of the original city to build a pathway from the mainland to the island to put it under siege. And then have siege engines and towers put on the end of that in order to knock the defenders of the walls out. Plus, all of those city-states that he had conquered along the coastline of the Mediterranean before, all of them send warships to help Alexander blockade the city. Alexander is so pissed by the time this is over, because it takes about 8 months to bring the city to heal. He slaughters all the men, and then the women and children, he ends up selling into slavery, and then he levels the new city as another example of what not to do. Alexander is ruthless. Now, when he gets to Egypt, the Egyptians are like, well, we're not going to fight you. We didn't like the Persians to start with. And well, we've had other kings roll through before. Here's where things start to go even weirder with Alexander. Now, his mother already said that, Philip wasn't your father, it was Zeus. It was the king of the gods. So Alexander, again, if you're going to be Pharaoh of Egypt, you are the son of the sun god, Ra. So Alexander does this, victory lap along the Nile where he goes to Thebes. He goes to a different Thebes,
Yeah.
not the one that destroyed, Memphis. He ends up going to this temple that is out in the Western desert. It is out in the Sahara Desert. And it's this oasis with a temple, an oracle basically to the sun god. He's there with a lot of his companions, and he's like, I got to go in and talk to the priest that's in there. And so these guys are sitting there under the palm trees, like, anytime you'd like to move on, we'd like to go home. He comes out, he's like, guys, I got good news for you. Not only am I the son of Zeus, I'm also the son of Ra. And
They
all
told
the,
me.
yeah, they told me. And so all of his companions just like, whatever, we don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Just let's get this over with so that we can move forward. So this is Alexander with this as an Egyptian pharaoh with the traditional double crown, or well, the crown of Egypt. The other thing that Alexander does is as he's conquering areas, he founds new cities. And surprise, surprise, they're all named after him.
Well, or his father.
Or his father.
Or
one
his
for
horse.
One for his horse. But so the most famous,
List.
the most famous that is still around is the Alexandria that's in Egypt,
Yeah.
along the coast of the Mediterranean.
And of the ones named after his father, Philippi in Greece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is a completely new city. He lays it out in a very scientific pattern so that all the roads are straight, all of them are interconnected. There's enough room between them that the city can grow as you go through. Eventually, Alexandria is going to be the capital of one of the successor states and going to be one of the leading cities in the ancient world after this. So one thing that he does with these settlements is that some of the soldiers in his army, he leaves behind as colonists. And then he expects Greeks and Macedonians to leave the homeland and settle there. Not just farmers, but philosophers, engineers, science. And the idea is that they're supposed to blend and intermarry with the people that are already there. And again, this is the idea that Hellenism, the idea that you're taking the best of all of these worlds and you're combining them together. Well, after he does his victory lap in Egypt, he finds out that Darius has raised another army. And he's gone to Babylon with this one, and he knows that this Persian army is gonna march north. So Alexander leaves a garrison behind in Egypt, and he takes the majority of the Macedonian army, and he goes east because he wants to confront Darius for a final time.
This is Golgamela.
Yep, and this is Galgamad. And Darius has been there at this battlefield, at this plains, at this area, longer than Alexander has. He has literally changed the landscape of this area to make it more advantageous for the Persian army. He's literally gone through the process of leveling hills, removing trees, in order to give the Persian cavalry the advantage, because the Persian cavalry outnumbers Alexander's by a factor of like 3-1.
His soldiers are waiting for battle just so they can stop digging.
Yeah. And what ends up happening is the Persian line, again, Darius has been able to raise an army 2 or 3 times the size of Alexander's. The Persian army stretches across the horizon. Alexander does not have a battle line big enough to fight like that. So what he does is another tactic that is new to this. In order to prevent the Persians from being able to actually have the advantage and attack, Alexander ends up doing this maneuver that's called the refused flank. Okay. He has his hoplites drawn out in battle like he normally would, and he has his cavalry on the flanks, and he has some of the Greek allies behind the Macedonian line to form kind of a reserve. But what Alexander is going to do is only one wing of his army is going to advance, and the other is going to stay stationary, and the center is going to slowly start moving up. And what that does is it throws the Persians completely off because they cannot attack. If they start moving, so Alexander's right flank, okay, this is the battle line as it starts, only the right flank is going to start moving towards the Persians. That forces the whole Persian army to freeze. Because, yes, this part is going to be threatened. But because you have the rest of the Macedonian army sitting there, if any of these Persian units try to attack Alexander's flank, they'll get hit by it. Now, the Persians, their infantry is basically just going to be stationary. What Darius is relying on is the tens of thousands of cavalry he has. He has hundreds of war chariots, and he has about 25 war elephants. The idea is that the infantry will hold Alexander, and then the cavalry will swing in behind and crush the Macedonians. He almost gets that. Because what ends up happening is, again, Alexander finds out where Darius is at. He's supposed to have this wing all move in at the same time at the same target. He takes the companion cavalry and that light infantry, and he leaves the wing that he's advancing to go after Darius. And this develops into the skirmish. Darius escapes again. And again, it's that instance where a lot of the Persian commanders who know that he's left are like, thanks for leaving us with the bag again. But they don't stop fighting. This battle is going to go on for 8 or 9 hours. It goes on for most of the time there's daylight. And while Alexander has this spectacular breakthrough on the right flank that he wanted, the Persians end up counterattacking. And they almost overrun the Macedonian army's left flank. They actually get into Alexander's camp. And again, it's Parmenion, it's his father's general and his son who are commanding the infantry. They have to send runners to track Alexander down and beg him to turn back around to save the Macedonian army. because they are being overwhelmed, because there are that many Persians still left on the battlefield. And Alexander grudgingly turns back around and hits the Persians from behind. And it's the only reason the Macedonians survive, is that Alexander finally turns around. The Persians who have broken through and gotten into the camp, they are so busy looting Alexander's tents and his soldiers' tents that they don't realize that Alexander has come back. That's where they end up getting defeated, is that they're so disorganized that Alexander comes in basically as the battle is over and saves the Macedonians. He does the same trick. The Persians who are left alive, the commanders who are able to get their forces to surrender Alexander, and then he absorbs them into the Macedonian army to make up for the losses. Now, there's nothing left of the Persian army at this point. After Gaugamela, what will end up happening is Alexander's cavalry basically chase Darius and his bodyguards from Gaugamela to Babylon. Darius keeps going east because he's not going to be captured. Alexander's advanced forces secure Babylon. They open the city because they look at it as, we're not going to have the population slaughtered. This is the second time Darius has left the battlefield. We're not going to have this happen. Alexander has his forces secure the palaces and the royal treasury that are in Babylon. And then he comes up afterwards. And then from basically what will end up happening is from Babylon eastward, Alexander and his army are chasing Darius down, capturing these cities, leaving a garrison behind, and then keep following Darius because Alexander wants to capture him alive.
He wants him on his knees.
He wants him on his knees to basically tell the Persians that the war is over and that Alexander is king. Alexander will get to the twin Persian capitals of Persepolis and Pasargad. When he's there, he and his officers and soldiers throw this massive drunken party and they burn the cities down to the ground.
Well, it wasn't just because of a drunken
No,
party. It
It's
was
supposed to be for revenge
Yeah.
for the Persians burning Athens. But it's an instance that Persepolis is one of the major wonders of the Persian Empire. And after it's burned down, Alexander kind of looks at it as, well, maybe that was a mistake to do that because we've destroyed, the spiritual heart of this empire. Darius and his bodyguards are still fleeing east because they still have most of Iran, most of Afghanistan that they could draw troops from, and a lot of northern India. Alexander's still chasing him down. Finally, Darius's cousin, one of his bodyguards, decides that he's had enough of this, that Darius is too much of a coward to fight Alexander. So he has him stabbed, assassinated. Darius isn't quite dead when they leave him behind.
Mhm.
Alexander's forces come up to this, basically it's a covered wagon where they find Darius nearly dead. Alexander gets there, and according to the myth, he's holding Darius while he dies. And then Alexander decides to avenge Darius because the only person who should have killed Darius was him. And now Basis, this cousin, has taken the mantle of Persian emperor. And so he potentially will keep fighting. So Darius's body is taken back and buried as a Persian king. And then Alexander is able to pull together more Persian support for him because it's regicide. And what will happen is Alexander chases Basis down, basically to kind of as far east as he can before they get there. And what will end up happening is this territory that's called Bactria. Think of that as the very northeastern part of modern day Iran and Afghanistan. So we're talking about the furthest east that you kind of get. Alexander catches up to Basis and has him crucified as punishment.
Yeah, the Romans did not invent crucifixion.
No.
And one of the sources say that he has him covered in honey and fire ants. But that seems like even a little bit much. But it is in one of the sources, so I pass it on. But they all say he was crucified.
And so what will end up happening is that, in effect, Alexander has become king of Persia. But one of the problems that he has is the same problems that the Persian has. The further east you go, the more tenuous your hold on those territories are. Because the leaders, the tribal leaders who are in Bactria and Sogdiana, the territory right next to there, were never really all that loyal to Persia to start with. And a lot of them see it that as this, the Persian Empire has been destroyed, Alexander is not their king. Alexander is very successful in subduing almost all of Persia. But the fighting in the east, when it comes to subduing Bactria, Sogdiana, this is like guerrilla warfare for him. And this is where his genius in military tactics slows down. Because a lot of the governors that had been loyal to the Persian emperor, he left behind. And a lot of them are going to turn on him. And so he has to spend years going back and forth across this territory, fighting the same people over and over and over again.
Just remember, no one has ever held Afghanistan.
Yes.
He didn't do it. The Russians didn't do it. We didn't do it.
About the only ones
He
who did it,
tries.
but the only ones who did it were the Mongols, and that was by basically
Yeah.
decimating the population. But one of the things that
Except
ends
for
up
the first
happening is as these campaigns are going on, Alexander still does not have a bride. He has no sons to inherit. And his general legitimate, yeah. Well, but the thing is, even the illegitimate ones, they might
can't
have been,
inherit.
well, yeah, they can't inherit. They might have followed him.
Mhm.
His generals, whether they're his father's or his own, are telling him, you need to find a Macedonian, a Greek woman and start punching out kids, legitimate kids.
One of the Persian princesses.
Well,
That
yeah,
would have
well,
been
yeah,
acceptable
we'll
as a
even go
conquest. Yeah.
that far down the line. And he's forced a lot of his generals and soldiers to marry Persian women or Egyptian women or whoever is there. The woman that he falls for is the daughter of one of these Bactrian tribal leaders, the Grecanized, or Greco, her name would be Roxanne. So even back in the old days, Roxanne, she's there. He ends up marrying her, and the generals who are there, and even his bodyguards are looking at this. You can have any woman in Greece or Macedon, or heaven forbid, the Persian royal court, and you marry some backwoods hillbilly woman, and she's going to be the legitimate one that you're going to roll with to start with. That's where a lot of the tensions start. A lot of his father's generals, his father's soldiers, Alexander is starting to release them back home. He's saying, okay, your terms of service are done. Go back west. You have we'll pay you out in the spoils that are there. Go back to being farmers or whatever you were before this. That doesn't mean the generals that he releases are going to survive. Because that guy Parmenion and his son, I should say his sons, they're going to die along the way. And the other members of Parmenion's family are killed under Alexander's orders with Olympias's help, and then the generals who are loyal to Alexander in Macedonia. A lot of the people that he's releasing, the Greeks and Macedonians, he replaces with Persians. So he has Persian soldiers and Persian generals in this Macedonian army. He's Hellenizing. He's mixing what had been his father's army and now his army. That makes a lot of his followers, even the ones that he grew up with, his companions, mad. Remember that Cletus the Black I was talking about, saving him at Granicus? He and Alexander get into a drunken argument, and Cletus says that you're destroying everything that your father set up, everything that is Greek. You are destroying by merging all these people in. And marrying Roxanne is a mistake. Alexander gets so pissed off that he grabs a spear and he murders Cletus the Black in front of everybody who's in that tent. And they have to separate everybody after that. There's a revolt among the Macedonians who are in the army that do not want to go any further east. Like, we've gone so far east, we don't even know where we live anymore. A lot of these guys were married beforehand and had children. They're looking at it as, we've avenged the Persian Wars. We crushed the Persian Empire and made it Greek. We want to go home. We don't want to marry Persian women, and we sure the hell don't want to be colonists in an Alexandria where we're never going to go back home. He ends up having the leaders of this mutiny crucified. And then a lot of the ones who won't repent also crucified, and has the rest of the army march past them. Crucifixion is not something that kills you immediately. Basically, what is ending up happening, and it's not the little, it's not the lowercase t that you're being crucified on. It's basically you are being put on this, and it's not that you're necessarily being nailed to this
No,
thing.
that would
You're-
be too quick.
Yeah, you're being tied to it. And what is going to kill you is either dehydration or exhaustion, because your arms are elevated, and it's basically forcing your lungs and the muscles in your solar plexus to work harder. And it's forcing your heart to work harder. You're dying of a heart attack
Or suffocation.
or suffocation, or if you make it long enough, the fact that you don't have any water. And you're left there as an example of what not to do. Long story short,
As I
Alexander,
say, we are at time and
Yeah.
we have like 3 years left.
yeah. Long story short, Alexander finishes the campaigns in Bactria and Sogdiana. Then he decides to keep going and he goes into India. And that's when eventually his army says, we've had enough. And they finally mutiny. And he understands that they will not go any further. And he turns around and goes back west.
But first he drags them through the driest place on earth and about 2/3 of them die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He gets back to Babylon. And then he ends up falling ill. And it could be a number of things. He could have been poisoned. He could have picked up a tropical disease from either India or from Mesopotamia. He was severely injured in India. He ended up getting shot in the lung by a 6-foot arrow. And they didn't think he was going to survive that. But he ends up dying, and he does not name a regent, a successor. Supposedly, every one of these generals comes in and asks them, who's going to hold the empire together until Roxanne delivers your child, because she's pregnant at this point, but they don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Now, in 323, this is when he gets to Babylon, and he ends up dying of this illness. Supposedly, he says, whoever is the strongest. So
But
his,
he didn't say that. 'cause
which
he
he
was
didn't say that.
stupid.
but each of his,
Supposedly,
each of his top generals, what ends up happening is they take the people who are loyal to him and their militaries, and they start divvying this empire up between them.
Alexander requested to be buried in the Egyptian fashion. So,
Mummified.
mummified, thank you, lost that word. Supposedly, when the people from Egypt came to take his body, he had not begun to decompose. So recent medical historian scholarship, however you want to put it, believes that he probably was in a deep coma and not actually dead yet. But they didn't realize that because, of course,
And then died,
It's
of
23.
dehydration
Yeah.
and starvation.
yeah, so.
And
that's
then his
okay.
body, he wanted buried in Alexandria. And as this kind of caravan carrying his body and other things are moving there, his general Ptolemy takes it and then moves it to Egypt and then holds the body hostage and the thing. And then Ptolemy controls Egypt, and then his other generals split up the territory of Turkey and Greece, and then Babylon and Iran, all the way up to India between them.
And Greece.
Yeah, and then you get about 300 years of infighting between these Macedonian city-states.
200 years of which is under Roman control.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, we got cut short.
Yeah.
We'll do an Alexander class.
Yes,
Yeah,
a strict
Yeah.
Alexander class.
yeah.
Because there's a lot
Yeah.
to.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Questions, comments, sarcastic remarks?
So much.
Don't march to the ends of the world. So
Yeah.
don't march to the ends of the world for somebody else. It's not worth it.